Good day and welcome to a sports special by Sports 731 Network, the leader in sports in West Tennessee, especially in high school sports. We're going to be talking today with one of the foremost authorities on West Tennessee high school football history, the play-by-play man of the Brownsville Tomcats, better known as the Haywood Tomcats, which is the correct way to say it, but we had to throw that Brownsville in because some of you still calling it that. We're going to educate you today. We're going to give you some facts. You're going to want to call 5 friends and call them up and tell them that when this is on the air, and it will be archived by Sports 731, and we're going to lead into our fabulous football season where we've got all kinds of teams. We've got all 5 teams here in Jackson that we're going to do, and we'll call their names during this broadcast. We've got Henry County. We've got Huntington. We've got McKenzie. We've got Peabody. We got Westview. We got Union City. And guess what? We bring you championship football because those teams that I have just named, all of them have won at least one state championship. Now, to introduce you even better, I'm going to show you the book that Dr. Rooks wrote. It's called 100 Years of Haywood Football, and he also, like we said, is play-by-play man. Robert, first of all, before we get into it, give the folks a little background, your playing credentials, and he was a player. Don't let him fool you. And if you want to tell a story or two on yourself, you can, then talk about your book, and then we'll get down to taking you from the year 1912 to the present.
Right. I wasn't there in 1912, but I came along a little bit later and said, "What'd you do?" Well, we did all things to help Steve Stoots and Rocky Felker. I just kind of hung around and did what Coach John Hooper, I coached during the 1968 season, was my senior year. And we were successful, but we had a lot of great players. And as I mentioned, John Hooper, great coach. But anyway, that's back in the 60s, and we'll talk about this. We want to go back to the origin of, I think, football in West Tennessee, Joe, talk about the Jackson High program, which was then Jackson High School, that later became merged with Mary High School and became what we know today as Jackson Central Mary in 1970. But tell me where we start. Enough about me. I just want to be a voice today, and sort of with your help, let's put a collage of information. So much information, and we're talking about over 100 years now that the teams we loved and played for and read about and know about played football at a highly successful level. West Tennessee football has been good.
Absolutely. And the goal that we've got today is to bring you 3 30-minute segments that will be aired on different days and, again, archived, and you'll be able to go back and see them forever because the ultimate goal for a football coach is to, 1, get a state championship ring, and this isn't football, this is another sport, 2, to have the gold ball that you place at your school, and that's what the kids play for. Yeah, they want scholarships. But, again, we're going to take you from the history, and we'll surprise you with some things. Jackson High and Haywood just happened to play in 1912, but they also are some of the earliest. In Middle Tennessee, a few of the rugby and lacrosse teams of some of those older schools, they started around the turn of the century. But here, football really starts. Jackson High attempted one game in 1905, but that's really not part of it. It was more like club ball and things like that. Just to tease you a little bit, Adamsville didn't play football until 1951.
Right.
And Alamo and some people like that used to have teams, didn't they?
That's right, but they hit and missed. Ripley had a football team early and then had to disband, but really 1912, as you mentioned, Haywood County and Jackson High played in 1912. And for the first couple of decades there in the teens and the 20s, a lot of teams would play each other more than once in a season because not every school had a football team, as you mentioned. Covington didn't really start playing football until 1923.
And let's help them with what's the mistake. Some people associate one school, the one that Dan Bland, Claude Symington then played for, with the present Covington High School.
That's right. Early on, it was named for 2 gentlemen, principals of 2 private schools in Tipton County, Byers Hall, hyphenated word, and they were Byers Hall from, well, I think I incorrectly stated 1923. Covington really started playing football in 1921, but they weren't Covington. They were Byers Hall all the way through 1969, and in 1970, the football team remained Covington, all the other sports changed to Byers Hall, and then in 1971, the whole school system became Covington. That's the school we know today. They kept the colors. If you know LSU colors, the purple and gold and white, well, that's what they've been. That's what they are. But they did a name change in 1970, Byers Hall that year and previous, but today they're Covington High School. But going to 1912, Haywood County and Jackson High School played twice.
Yes.
Home and home, and that's what usually you would do if you played a team that had a football team that you could schedule a game with. You'd play them at your house one game, and then the next time down the road you'd go to the opponent's field. And identical scores, the best I have come up with through archives, Jackson defeated Brownsville. Jackson defeated Haywood County 18-0 twice during that 1912 year. And people ask me a lot, well, Robert, through the years, who is Brownsville's biggest rival? Well, and it probably changed. During the Big Ten years, I could safely say it was Ripley, the next to the last game of the year, and then Byers Hall, or today Covington, the last game of the year. But every now and then we would play big old bad Jackson. And year in and year out, and even today, when you know you're going to play and it's JCM today, the Tomcats get fired up, and that's, I have to say, up and down the board, Jackson, Brownsville, that's one of the biggest rivals you'll see.
Robert, before we move to some other schools like our buddies at Dyersburg, and the reason we say buddies, Robert and I both played in the old Big Ten Conference. Dyersburg started playing football in 1913, I believe.
Well, they're a 1912 school also.
Oh, okay, 1 year earlier.
That's right.
Yeah.
They played with Haywood and Jackson High School. Yeah, Dyersburg was an early school. But when I look back, and let's stop here now, I looked, it's remarkable that you say rival. I looked back. Haywood High and Jackson High played 36 times. I don't like repeating this because
I know where you're headed.
But
And
Brownsville
I'm an old
only
Jackson
won
High guy.
12. Jackson won 24. So a rival, yes, but we always say, well, Jackson had more students. They did, had more to choose from. But Haywood only has 12 wins, 24 losses against Jackson High School. How about this? After Jackson merged with Mary High School, and there's your big rival, too, from 1970 to now, we have played 46 times, an equal amount of wins and losses. How about that? Haywood has won 23, Jackson's won 23. There's your rival.
Just waiting for the next time they can start playing because obviously Jackson in a smaller classification.
That's
right.
But I would think these two administrators and coaches, the two schools would get together and say, look, we need to play each other. It's a rival. Get the fans involved, play ball, fill up the stands. Yeah, I think it'll come around, Joe. I think so, too.
Well, you and I both have seen on a cold Thanksgiving day with it snowing or spitting snow and the field damp and the wind was blowing, it was cold. There was standing room only at Rothrock Stadium in November for the Big Ten playoff game, which y'all royally whipped us 26-12.
Rothrock Stadium, built in 1938. That's when they cranked it up, and named for Judge Thomas Rothrock. And that's been a great place to play for years, but no longer. And now JCM's got their own field and new campus. And, yeah, even though a different classification, and that's what's hurt. We used to have conferences. We used to have playoffs. We used to have bowl games. A lot of that's gone away. So now you're delegated to playing games with similar enrollments. Well, you've lost some rivals. Haywood County doesn't play routinely Covington or Ripley or Dyersburg or Jackson anymore. They've got us bunched up now playing teams out of Memphis. Our students don't even know where these places are in Memphis. I don't either. It's a different world today, Joe.
It's better to come, less than 30 miles down the road and play at Jackson.
Yeah.
Even Northside and Haywood got to have a small rivalry. It started late, and then obviously the playoff system has divided them away from each
That's
other.
right.
Again.
That's right. And we're not similar enrollments anymore. They're a 3A school, we're a 4A school, but things change, and that's right.
Yeah. We've got some other teams. We've mentioned Henry County, which you and I are more familiar with, Grove High School, and my best knowledge of it, Grove began there at Paris in 1920 and didn't become Henry County High, I want to say, until it was either 1970 or 69.
I think 69. They started a little earlier, but you're right. It was Grove High School. They were the Grove Blue Devils. Their colors were blue and white, and now they're Henry County. They're the only high school in that county, and it's Henry County today, and they're the Patriots, and they're red, white, and blue colors. And if you think about a name, go back in time, and I really didn't know this gentleman. You know the name too, but when you think of Paris, and really you got to divide it, is it Grove or is it Henry County? Well, this would be more to the Grove era, was Bobby Jelks. Was the coach and the official and whatever, but he coached, and their standout team during his days, and really in most all of what Henry County and Paris played, was 1949. Chick King was this guy they all talked about, a little All-American that came out of there and played some college ball, but they went undefeated 11-0, because back then you could tie a game, but they were 11-0, and that was the Paris Grove Blue Devils, coached by Bobby Jelks. Now, who else came out of Paris? Richard Ross played for Grove High School. John Hooper played. The only Big Ten, and we're going to talk about conferences in a minute. The Big Ten Conference was started in 1940. Paris Grove was a high school in that conference. John Hooper played, graduated in 1947, but on the 46 team, Grove had to play against Fayette County, and Grove won the Big Ten Conference that year by defeating Fayette County out of Somerville. So we have some players. Later, John Hooper left there, went to Union University, and became a head football coach in Brownsville. Richard Ross was an assistant under John Hooper at Haywood. Then he came over after Tom Fan left at Jackson High School as the coach, and Richard Ross coached for several years here at Jackson High and later Jackson Central Mary.
A couple of things about Richard. He also played on the Union football team too.
Yeah,
and
okay.
But there's a story, I don't have it all, but everybody says John picked him up one day and brought him to Haywood and said, "You're going to be an assistant coach."
The story I've always heard on that, Joe, is John Hooper was already hired in 1955 as the head coach at Haywood County. Well, Richard was on his way looking for a job and standing on the side of the road hitchhiking, and John had gone back to Paris to get some stuff to come back to Brownsville, and he looked up, and Richard's on the side of the road hitchhiking, and he asked Richard, said, "Richard, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm going to Memphis to look for a job." He said, "No, you're not." He said, "You get in the back seat. You're going to ride with me to Brownsville. You're going to be my number one assistant football coach." Of course, it wasn't but two of them on the team, two coaches on the squad anyway, John and Richard. And Richard stayed from 1955 to 1965, had a 11-year stint there, and was a wonderful guy. We were scared to death of John Hooper, but you loved Richard Ross, and you could talk to him.
A very human and kind gentleman.
That's right. He was
although he could get mad, and we at Jackson, I didn't want to hear him saying, "I want a lot of people chasing people and a lot of people hitting people," because if he said that, he was not happy with you.
That's
and,
right.
And you brought this up, and I don't know if y'all can see it because I didn't get a chance to blow it up any bigger. These are the three conferences that were well known. Later in history came the Midwest Conference, but the playoff system knocked out the Midwest Conference. Up at the top, obviously, is the Big Ten. In the middle is the Volunteer Conference. It actually had two divisions, and then one that we'll get Robert Brooks to talk about, the Reelfoot Conference, and then there were some independents and things like that.
Yeah.
And the Big Ten, since we've already introduced it to evidence, at this time in 1964, and Robert, I'll let you address it. Some teams left, some came in. Jackson High was not a charter member of the Big Ten Conference, but Jackson, Brownsville, Paris, Humboldt, Summerville, Dyersburg, Union City, Milan, Ripley, Halls, Covington, and Trenton were members in 64.
Right. Well, let's go back and go before the Big Ten Conference. Early, and in 1924 all the way up to 1939, that's the earliest conference I know about, Joe, and it was called the West Tennessee Conference. Well, who was in that? Sort of a scattering of teams, and really anybody that played football. There were no classifications then. You just played whoever you could. Here's a list alphabetically of who was in the West Tennessee Conference. Brownsville, Covington, well, it would be Brownsville, Byers Hall, Dyersburg, Fayette County, Halls, Humboldt, Jackson, Lexington, Milan, Millington was in this grouping. Newbern was a high school at the time. O'Brien, Ridgely, Ripley, Peabody, and Union City, they were all in what we call the West Tennessee Conference. Now, in 1940, that ended when Tiny Knee, my grandfather, Irvin Tiny Knee out of Ripley, R.K. Castellaw out of Covington, and George Tyree out of Somerville, they formed the Big Ten Conference. And the original 10 members, I'll relate those to you. The original 10 were Covington, were Byers Hall, Dyersburg, Fayette County, Haywood County, Humboldt, Milan, Parish Grove, Ripley, Trenton, and Union City. Later on, and I think they intentionally left Jackson out of that grouping because Jackson did not come and be a member until 1956. And at one time, Halls was a member. One time, Martin was a member. Teams came and went. And the Big Ten Conference, the original grouping went all the way to 1969. And then, because of classification started, playoffs, they actually added some Memphis schools, some AAA schools, kept the name Big Ten going to 1976. But the original Big Ten started in 1940, went all the way to 1969. There was a Little Ten Conference.
Yes.
And who's in that? Well, that's Brewston, Dresden, Gleason, Greenfield, Huntington, Martin, McKenzie, Newbern, Ridgely, and Tiptonville. They had an 11-year run from 1940 to 1950. Where we're playing the Big Ten, I didn't know there was a Little Ten, but there was another group called the Little Ten.
And that one broke up some of them because they became members of the Volunteer Conference,
right.
which had an unusual situation. They had two divisions.
That's right. Well, even the Big Ten at one time had an East-West, but in the North and South part of the Volunteer Conference, the North at one time, and the Volunteer started in 1951, ended in 1978. The North member teams in the Volunteer Conference were Northside, Camden, Lexington, McKenzie, Trezevant, Brewston, and Huntington. The South members in the Volunteer were Decaturville, Hardin County, which is a lot larger school,
yes.
Chester County, Parsons, Southside, Selmer, and Bolivar.
Hardin County was probably the biggest school, and at that point in time, people still tended to call them Savannah.
That's right. And they really didn't change that name until 1959. Prior to 59, they were Savannah, and after that became Hardin County.
Well, you mentioned a team called Trezevant. They went out of existence as a football program maybe in the 50s or the early 60s. Robert would know that. But they had one player that became extremely famous. Once upon a time, he was a pulling guard for the Cleveland Browns. He played his football at Ole Miss, and everybody says Trezevant, they think of Memphis Trezevant. No, right. Don't get them mixed up.
No.
Totally different school. But Trezevant had a guy named Gene Hickerson, who was one of the finest guards that Paul Brown ever coached in the NFL.
That's right. They said a postman that had connection with one of the coaching staff at Oxford, which is where Ole Miss is, was delivering some mail at Tresvant. And he went up to deliver the mail, and this big strapping guy came out on the front porch, and he looked at him and said, "What's your name, boy?" And he said, "I'm Gene Hickerson." He went back and called Oxford and said, "I found y'all somebody you need to get down and to play football at Ole Miss." And he started with the Cleveland Browns as a pulling guard, blocked for
Jim Brown, the great running
Jim
back.
Brown. That's right.
Actually, I think he even got to block for Leroy Kelly for a while, too.
Yes, but Gene Hickerson, and he had a brother, and I'm trying to think of what Gene Hickerson's brother's name was. He actually went to Ole Miss, too. And Tresvant played football from 1950. They ended in 1961. But, yeah, that's not the Memphis Tresvant. This was a school up here in Carroll County that went for 12 years. But Gene Hickerson, all pro for the Cleveland Browns.
Robert, let's go back to the volunteer conference for a minute. And in this segment, and this is Dr. Robert Rooks, the voice of the Haywood County Tomcats, also the best dentist in Haywood County, and a former football player of John Hooper's. But Northside didn't start football till 1947. Correct me on Huntington, but the date I have for them is 1927 is when they started football. And, of course, the Lexington Tigers started in 1923 playing football, but were not part of this conference. And Brewston, which is also the Tigers, had an early start that I'm not sure of their start, but I know it was early. McKenzie, what a history that they have in McKenzie, 1924 approximately, and they've won a state championship recently in the last, 5 years. They've won with Tate Serber as their quarterback. And, of course, Camden, they were called Camden Central, weren't they, at one time?
Yeah, I believe you're right.
1924. Of course, Savannah is how it was listed in 64, which I've happened to pull. And Robert's got a much more organized notebook than I do. I have to pull mine out of files, and then I junk them all together.
But you're right on Huntington.
Yeah.
The number I got is 1927, his first football team that Huntington had.
And a couple of state championships to come later after that, and they've done a good job up there.
Yeah.
Southside didn't get started. You and I agree on 56.
56.
And Henderson, known as Chester County now, I have 1928 on them. And it's going to be in the late 20s because there was a comment made they did not play football at Chester County / Henderson in the early 20s. And, of course, Bolivar Central, as far as it being Bolivar Central, started around 1936.
Yeah, I got Chester County in 1928.
Yeah, okay, we're agreeing. Yeah. And they were called Henderson at one time. Now they're, on their girls' basketball uniform used to have that big H on there. And they changed now, it's Chester County, and you'll see our Eagle.
Chester County, we'll mention this, we'll talk a little bit more later about mascots, but today they're the Eagles. But in the 30s, Chester County, they were known as the Whippets. Whippets, the dog, I guess, but the Whippets, Chester County Whippets.
And in a later segment, Robert, they don't want to miss it. Robert's got some of I thought I knew some nicknames, and we're going to bring some schools up that you've never heard of, but yes, they played football for extended time in the state of Tennessee.
Yep.
But we've got nicknames, et cetera, like that. And let's see, Selmer. Of course, you don't know them as Selmer now because they're really not truly Selmer now.
Right.
They're McNary County.
That's right.
And so you've got two different start dates on them. And Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, they were the Lions at one time.
That's correct. Bobcats today, but Lions prior to that they were. Yeah, I don't know the year they changed the mascot name, but they were Selmer Lions, and I guess when they changed to McNary County, they became the Bobcats.
Absolutely. And, of course, the Real Foot Conference, very interesting conference, a lot of smaller teams. And at one time, Dresden was a power in that. Of course, Dresden has a state championship to their credit later on, I think, here in the 2000s. But I have Dresden, Lake County, Martin, Gleason, Greenfield, Alamo, Sharon, and South Fulton. And, yes, Sharon did have a football team, folks.
Well, and even one time, Tennessee Academy in 1975.
That's right.
They weren't a member a long time because they didn't come about to be a football team until 1971. Tennessee Academy was a private school in Brownsville. They were part of the Real Foot Conference.
And they were headed up by one of your old coaches, Babe Felker.
That's right.
That's Rocky's
We're going to
daddy.
talk a little bit about him, too. Edwin Jewell Babe Felker. I'll give you his coaching resume. He's been around different places. But an interesting note here about the Reelfoot Conference and the Midwest Conference. Obion County was in both the Midwest Conference and the Reelfoot Conference in 1970.
Yes.
But these Rebels were not eligible to play in the Midwest Conference championship that particular year, but they actually belonged to two different conferences.
Absolutely. And at one time, these teams were in and out of some conferences, but they were independents in 64.
Yep.
Parsons. Obion Central, well, since you mentioned them, they were an independent in 64, but joined the other two conferences. Decaturville was an independent, and Munford. Sometimes we forget about Munford.
Munford was an independent year in and year out. They just couldn't find a niche. Sometimes Nearburn got in that category. They just couldn't find a group they competed with or wanted to be, or geographically they couldn't fit. So you're right, some of these teams just were independents. Did you mention the Midwest Conference much?
No, I did not have it. You have more information on them than I did. And it was a short-lived conference because the playoff system basically ruined conference football.
Yeah, the Midwest started as late as 1970, and by 1976 it was over. But here's the Midwest Conference, and all of these are conferences in West Tennessee, highlighted to me by what Joe and I talked about, the Big Ten Conference. But here's the Midwest Conference: Henry County, Humboldt, Lake County, Milan, Munford, Obion Central, Peabody, Union City, and Westview.
Absolutely. And I want to mention three other conferences. One of them I may not have their name completely right, and they were actually more. One was a conference up in Upper East Tennessee with Kingsport and Johnson City and some of those places. They had the Big Nine Conference, which had the same kind of status that our Big Ten Conference had. And then you come to Nashville, they had what was called the Nashville Interscholastic League. And it was a pretty well-organized league there. And then Memphis had the MIASS, or I don't have the initial right, but it's Memphis Interscholastic School Association. And
right. In Shelby County, you had two groupings, Joe. You had the city schools that they would play each other and have a championship. Then you had the county schools. You know, you had your Bartletts and Colliervilles in them, but in the city you had Catholic and Central. And you talk about what was on the sweater, Central. Of course, Central and MUS, Memphis University School, and Christian Brothers were three of the earliest schools in the Mid-South. They started football prior to 1900. They started in 1894. But they were inner city schools, and they would have a championship. So, yeah, they were some schools that dated way back. And back during those days, too, even Brownsville, even Haywood County, would play like Bolton College or McTier or McFerrin. Some of these private schools, they were colleges just to get a game. We played back then as West Tennessee Teachers College, well, later became the University of Memphis. They had a football team. We had a football team.
Well, I understand some of our teams here in West Tennessee actually played Bethel College when
That's
they
right,
had a football.
That's right.
There were a couple of other schools that they played. Memphis was Memphis Normal, then Memphis Teachers.
Yep.
And that was an interesting situation. And sometimes, like Jackson High was bad about playing out-of-state schools. I know Austin Tech will come up in this conversation. Robert, as you look that up, let's give our final thoughts about conferences for right now, and I want you to answer a question because I think you and I will agree, and I may add my 2 cents worth. Which one did you enjoy better, conference play or the playoffs that we have now?
Oh, not even a question. No,
You,
I can answer that with my eyes closed. No, you're right, Joe. Conferences, that's where you had rivals. It was so much fun to have the Big Ten Conference, and you wanted to be one of the top 2 teams at the end of the year because you had a playoff. Yep. Now, in 1958 and 59, they ended up doing a round robin, didn't have a playoff game. But during the history from 1940 to 1969, the top 2 teams played. They played on Thanksgiving Day at 2 o'clock. You could have a tornado; it wasn't going to stop that game.
That's right.
It was always played at 2 o'clock. Whether played a role in it sometimes. But that was a one of conferences. The kids out there today don't know what a conference is. They don't know what a conference championship is. And, yeah, Joe, that it just was so much and as we've talked about, money has ruined things. And they even when they went to playoffs, they had it right at one time, saying, okay, there are 8 different regions in each classification throughout the state of Tennessee. Take the top 2 teams in a region, and the number 1 team gets to play at home the first game, and the number 2 team has to travel, and stop right there.
Yep.
Well, now you've got some regions that have 4 teams in it, and they take all 4 teams in the playoffs. You can be 0-10 or 1-9 and qualify. Well, that's just crazy.
Well, there's even a worse example than that, Robert. Up in Upper East Tennessee, one region wound up due to some odd circumstances only having 3 teams in it.
Yeah.
And there was a bye in the playoff system.
I've seen that.
I agree with Robert. I love the conference play. I love the bowl games, and we're going to talk bowl games too a little later. But any final thoughts before we end this first segment?
Well, let me just end
on
with here's the
conferences?
name changes of what we know today as the University of Memphis. They were the West Tennessee State Teachers College from 1925 to 1930. They later became State Teachers College, then Memphis State College, then Memphis State University, and today they're the University of Memphis, and they became the University of Memphis in 1994. And where is that? It's in the football book I wrote
And
over
it's
10
backed
years
up
ago.
with documentation because I have some documentation on that, and Bethel and Lambeth, and even there may be a Union game or two with a high school team. I'm not sure about the Union part, but those teams had college teams, but the high schools acquitted themselves quite well playing back then
Well,
against
yeah,
some
it was
of those
level.
teams.
I mean, yeah, that's your right.
And a lot of good things happened. Conference play, it was great. We've got you a long way. We're getting ready to take you to playoff football, but we're going to save that for a segment. We'll come back with some schools you didn't think played, Winsome School, some nicknames. We're going to start throwing more players out. And don't forget about Gene Hickers. If you don't know about him, go back and look him up. We're going to call a timeout to get a T.O. baby, as Dick Vitale would say, and we're going to take a timeout in this first segment. Thank you.